When they had gone, I wrote replies to letters from the Commissioner, Board, and other officials, and was usually a good deal hindered and interrupted by deputy collectors and other officers coming in to speak to me about this or that. Generally, however, by 2 o'clock the correspondence was finished. Whether it was or not, at 2 we had tiffin, and we wanted it. At this meal, the Joint Magistrate, the Deputy Commissioner, and the District Superintendent of Police joined me. And while we ate, we talked shop and got through a good deal of business.
There was paperwork here, too, but with a difference. The Spanish paper was regulations, requests, reports on compliance. British paper was the record of past action, proof of correct and just procedure, and the assurance of just future action.
By 4 o'clock, the work was done, and I went home. Around 6, I drove with my wife. Our drive generally ended at the club, where we met nearly everyone in the station, both men and women.
That was another confession. A superior and exclusive caste had been formed by the colonists. It seemed wholly innocent on the veranda, but the reaction from beyond the hedge or fence, especially from the rich, educated, and cultivated Indians, the Nehrus and the Gandhis, was something else again.
About 7:30, we drove home to dinner and were generally in bed and asleep soon after 9.
There were also things in India that the happy few on the veranda could not see, and didn't see even when, in accordance with a wise custom, they carried justice and tax collection out to the countryside. They couldn't see local abuse and mismanagement of Indians by Indians. And in time, this would act strongly against the foreign rulers, and especially in some of the princely states where mismanagement was sometimes accepted as a matter of policy.
The poorer classes of the rural population were very heavily oppressed. We did our best to protect them, but a mere handful of foreigners in so large a country cannot even hear of many of the things that are done behind their backs.
John Beams was probably more efficient in dealing with British than with Indian abuse. In 1866, a British indigo planter was accused of terrorizing his peasants. Beams moved strongly against him. He shows how remote he was from those who were in India to make money, and also how superior he felt to those so concerned.
It was not from mere lust of power that I insisted on being master of my district and having my own way in all things, but because the district was a sacred trust delivered to me by the government, and I was bound to be faithful to that charge. I should have been very base had I, from love of ease or wish for popularity, sat idly by and let others usurp my place and my duties. Ruling men is not a task that can be performed by le premier venu. And though I was comparatively young at it, still I had had 5 years' training and experience, prefaced by a liberal education, while these ex-mates of merchant ships and ci-devant clerks in counting houses had had neither. I had to do my duty according to my lights.
The rule of law extended to the far corners of India. To this distant village came the court and the call, all with petitions to be heard, draw nigh.
किसी ने कलेक्टर साहब को दरखास्त देनी है तो आ जाए. किसी ने कलेक्टर साहब को दरखास्त देनी है तो आ जाए.
From the half-century following Beam's arrival in the Punjab, India was, I believe, by the standards of the time, one of the better governed countries of the world. Persons and property were safe, thought and speech were secure, more secure than in recent times. There was effective action to irrigate land, arrest famine. Docks, roads, bridges were built. Railways, also built as a defense against local famine, spanned the subcontinent. The courts functioned, in the main, impartially, and to the very great pleasure of the litigiously minded Indians. All was accomplished by an incredibly small number of people. The Indian Civil Service never enrolled more than 1,000 Europeans at any one time in its history.
The cost of government is no detail in a country where everyone is poor, nor is justice in the collection of rents and taxes. The Raj, for its time, was also very efficient in building irrigation works, encouraging railways, and in enforcing law and order, religious peace in particular. It was an infinitely better government than that of the corrupt, anarchic, exploitive, undisciplined despots that the British had replaced. Once in a relaxed conversation, I asked Nehru, when should the British have left? What was the optimal year? He exploded. They never had any business being in our country. I reminded him that P.C. Mahalanobis, the great statistician and a mutual friend, had said that for the first century, the British were seen as liberators in Bengal. Nehru subsided and smiled and conceded the point. He said, well, they should have been gone after the First World War. India was the great test. The British were race-conscious, clubby, sometimes arrogant. But those like beams that gave their lives to India were greatly respected by the people they ruled. And they, in turn, loved India, the grandeur of its people and its culture and its scene. As this remarkable building, the Royal Pavilion here at Brighton, so wonderfully attests. There was never so nostalgic a club as that of the old India Hands, I know, for I'm myself a kind of modern honorary member. But like all efforts by one people to rule another at a distance, this one too failed. What was it that turned the confident assertion of a right and a duty into a rush, pell-mell, to get out?
History has few neat turning points, and colonialism in India is an exception. The zenith of imperial power was the great Durbar in Delhi in 1911, attended by the new King Emperor and his Queen. Hollywood apart, the modern world has not elsewhere seen such pomp, such pageantry. The surviving feudal rulers came to pay homage to their master. The forces that would act to expel the ruler were already present. Those that would weaken his will would very soon follow. The wars were just ahead. World War I would weaken, destroy the old ruling classes in Europe that were the strongest defenders of the colonial idea. Also the empires within Europe, as we'll see next time. And both wars would create a heavy obligation of the rulers to the ruled. The train of ideas and events was in motion, slowly but inexorably. No empire ever had such a resource in colonial manpower, disciplined, intelligent, numerous, to which to turn. Its use in the two wars created a strong moral obligation to concede self-government and independence to those who had served so well. Some saw the obligation the other way around. The troops should defend the empire against the Congress Party.
In France, in Libya, and in Burma, Indian troops have given their lives fighting for a cause they know to be just. They represent the spirit of India, not the Congress mob. A mob swayed by the eloquence of their leaders into falsely believing that an India without England would be an India for the Indians.
But it would be an India without England. I'm an economist. As a matter of trade union pride, I look very carefully for economic causation. I do not think economics had much to do with Indian